as a lot of ancient societies said, if it's correct with nature, it's correct. Doesn't need more than that. But if it's not correct with nature, the answer is already given. In nature, a bee does it, you don't know what happened. We do it exactly like a bee, but we know what happened. Just to give us an idea what happens, what works nicely. You can do everything in grape breeding. It's amazing. So why shouldn't you? And I think next or this century will be the century of grape breeding.
Hey, welcome to Beyond Organic Wine. I'm Adam Huss. Thanks so much for listening. With Beyond Organic Wine, I hope to inspire and inform you so that you can have meaningful impact on shaping the future of wine. A majority of this interview with Valentin Blattner is available only for paid subscribers to the Beyond Organic Wine Substack. You can subscribe and listen to the full audio on the Substack app or at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. A huge thanks to those of you who already subscribe and make this and all the other content at Beyond Organic Wine possible. I couldn't do it without you. And happy Earth Day. When this episode comes out, I'll be celebrating Earth Day at the Oregon Organic Wine Growers Conference. Looking forward to it. If you don't know the history of Earth Day, it's worth checking out. At least the Wikipedia entry about it is a good read, pretty dense and deep. We recently had what was considered to be the largest single-day protest in U.S. history for the No Kings protest on March 28th, 2026. An estimated 8 million people protested that day. On the first Earth Day in 1970, over 20 million people in the U.S. participated in marches, rallies, teach-ins, and demonstrations across the country. Of course, now, 55 years after the first Earth Day, we all have microplastics in our brains. So I'm feeling a little cynical about our chances of not having a king in another 55 years or less. And by the way, latex paint is the single largest source of microplastics in the ocean. Found that out recently. To combat cynicism, I took a trip to visit the coastal redwood forests of Humboldt County in California and hiked in several forests along the Avenue of the Giants. It was one of the most amazing places I've ever been. Several of the groves, like the Rockefeller Forest, are considered to be on the same level of global uniqueness with places like the Amazon rainforest. It was unbelievable. Ironically, the only feeling I have to compare it to was the first time I visited New York City at the age of 16, having spent my entire life until then in a small rural community. I entered immense canyons of skyscrapers, and the scale of it awed me. I'm certainly more jaded in some ways than I was when I was 16, but the scale of the life in the redwoods left me wonderstruck. I was speechless not because the experience of the forest took the words away, but because it inspired every word, all at once, as poetry and music that can't be expressed within the limitations of alphabets and voices. Some of the awe was also in knowing that these epic forests grew themselves from the air, and that the trees were older than the United States by 1,000 years, and some even older than the Roman Empire. Some of the trees I forest bathed beneath started growing in years before calendars. My house in Los Angeles was framed by lumber that came from cutting down those irreplaceable coastal redwoods. In the population boom in the U.S. West Coast during and after World War II, these ancient forests from Santa Cruz to Vancouver, the remnants of which brought tears to my eyes as I walked among them, were clear-cut to build Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. But not everyone saw the forests as resources for the taking. I found more saints to add to my registry of saints, my own personal registry. On November 19th, 1924, Laura and James Mahan discovered that logging had begun in one of the groves of ancient trees. Laura put her body between the machinery and the trees, while James took to the courts to have the logging stopped. I stood at the spot where they took their stand. There's a plaque to their memory there, on a stone between two stumps, and each of the stumps is easily 10 feet in diameter. And beyond that plaque, a magnificent, magical forest continues to grow that would not have existed without the Mayhans, and the many others who joined their efforts. Julia Butterfly carried on their legacy in my lifetime, and she wrote the book The Legacy of Luna, if you want to read it, about the year and a half she spent living in the top of an ancient redwood to save it from being cut down. She's one of my living saints. Rockefeller was to his time what billionaires are to our time, and though I wouldn't consider him a saint, he was so moved by the splendor of the redwoods that he gave millions of dollars to conserve one of the most spectacular old-growth groves that now bears his name. As I drove to the Rockefeller Forest after visiting some of the other groves, I was skeptical I'd be any more impressed than I already had been by the majesty of the trees that I'd seen. But I was wrong. If you get a chance to travel along the Avenue of the Giants, I would put it up there as one of the highest experiences of my life. Of course, I'm a tree nerd, but love, births, deaths, a few mushroom experiences, and walking on the sacred ground at the base of unimaginably behemoth trees and breathing their enchanted air as the rain filtered through billions of green needles. Maybe it takes a journey around the moon to remind us how fragile and lucky and unbelievably precious this life is that we all get to live here together on Earth. And if so, maybe it was worth whatever it took to provide that reminder. But I found that reminder in the redwoods. I wish there were more forests like this. I wish we hadn't cut so many of them down. But I'm so grateful for the ones that are left. Book recommendation. If you haven't read Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, I can't recommend it enough. There are a few books I've read, and I can look back and see there was a before that book and an after that book version of me, and this is one of those books. And it's a perfect book for Earth Day. And speaking of books, I'm celebrating the fact that I just turned in the final review of the copy edit of my upcoming book, Wine Liberated. Chelsea Green is the publisher, and it's coming out this November, just in time to give you something to read after harvest or after pruning if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. And I mention this because my guest for this episode is one of the few people besides me who is talking about some of the topics and themes that I write about in Wine Liberated. Valentin Blattner is a grape geneticist and winemaker, and he may be one of the most well-known grape breeders on Earth. Considering the way that adaptation has been marginalized and even disparaged by wine for the last 80 plus years, that may not be saying much. But Valentin has been hybridizing grapes to create new interspecific crosses since the 1980s and has developed at least a dozen new named varieties of grapes. Again, that may not sound like much, but in grape breeding, which is a slow and low success rate enterprise, that's huge for a single person's lifetime. Valentin has his own Wikipedia page if you want to see the varieties he has developed. His work has taken him around the world and has given him what I would call a liberated perspective on wine, based in ecological wisdom and, well, sanity. Among many other topics covered in this interview, Valentin discusses an ecology-first approach to viticulture and describes his trellising system that, together with resistant varieties of grapes, can reduce vineyard work to 16 hours per hectare per year. And throughout this interview, there are so many quotable aphorisms and illuminating insights from years of being on the cutting edge of wine. I'll mention one of the most important ideas that he brings up because it's a theme I'm exploring and will be exploring throughout this upcoming year, and it will be a key part of the second Embracing Hybrid Grapes conference. Valentin broaches the idea that we need to begin thinking about improving our grape varieties every 25 to 30 years. His point is that life has changed, and the things that like to feed on grapevine constantly adapt to grapevine resistances. If we don't adapt the grapevines regularly, we will continue to be dependents of the pesticide industry. I've realized for some time now that when talking about hybrid grapes, I'm not really talking about hybrid grapes. I'm actually talking about hybridization. In other words, my vision is not to keep our same way of thinking about wine and just swap in new varieties of grapes that don't need pesticides. I think we need to revolutionize our thinking about wine. We need to stop binding our wine traditions and cultures to specific varieties of grapes and instead embrace a culture of ongoing adaptation. In recent years, we've created celebrities of sommeliers and winemakers, the two roles most divorced from the ecology of wine and what actually makes wine great and delicious. It's time we start celebrating grape breeders and growers as the real celebrities of wine, and the people who will enable wine to continue for all of those winemakers and somms to have something to play with. People like Valentin Blattner are literally growing the only ecologically viable future of wine. Enjoy. Valentin, welcome to Beyond Organic Wine. Thank you so much for doing this.
Not a problem. It's my pleasure.
You are a grape breeder. You've been working with breeding resistant varieties of grapes for quite a long time, most of your life, if I understand. And you've
Yes.
helped,
I'm
yeah, and
getting
you've
old.
helped develop quite a few varieties of grapes, which, you have a Wikipedia page, which people can look up Valentin Blattner and see, those varieties on your Wikipedia page. But what I want to ask you is, of the varieties that you've helped develop, which ones have most achieved the goals, all of the goals that you have been breeding towards?
Well, in nature, you never find something which is the ultimate variety forever, because
Right.
call it evolution. It always goes further and further. A plant is defending itself against pests or fungi or whatever, uh, but the fungi, they continue to develop themselves as well, so they get resistant against the resistance, and that's nature. So it's always, I would say, every 25 or 30 years, you have to come up with the new model of, well, let's call it Cabernet Sauvignon. To keep the flavor of Cabernet Sauvignon is not very difficult. It's quite uh, easy to breed the Cabernet Sauvignon flavor. And if you have a resistant Cabernet Sauvignon for 30 years, you have to start looking at the next resistance, add some new genes or new combinations of genes, and to confuse the fungi, as simple as that. That
Yeah.
is,
So, I mean, I was sort of setting you up there with that question. Now I realize, but what I talk about is thinking of wine as an ongoing process of adaptation rather than trying to find the next Cabernet. We can't think of it as that. Like we will just always be adapting. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
yes, well, as I said, you have to uh, keep up with nature.
Right, right.
You cannot have a monoculture for centuries which is not attacked by everything which starts to like it. And the fungi, they, once they get into that genetic of Pinot Noir, for example, everything is starting to chew on the poor Pinot Noir. So you have to change the genetic from time to time to make a break for the fungus or whatever is going for the grape. And so, as I said, the flavor you can keep quite easily, but the overall genetic has to be changed from time to time. Actually, in a lot of cultures in agriculture, for example, sunflowers, every 3 or 5 years you have the new version which is resistant against the new version of the fungi. That is just about the way to go. And having Pinot Noir for 500 years, the same genetic, I think it's an easy game for the fungi. And as simple as that. And
Yeah.
on top of that, it is something interesting to have local varieties which are uh, that Coca-Cola type of thing, which all over the world the same. It's going to be boring, like Chardonnay,
Yeah.
as I mentioned already several times. Uh, Everybody planting Chardonnay, it all tastes the same. You add some flavor. That's what you do. If you put it in oak, you add that vanilla flavor. So you have that vanilla type of thing, which is for, well, little girls, but um, vanilla flavor is everywhere in the food. Uh, so people are very used to vanilla. Okay, you get used to Chardonnay, oaky Chardonnay very quickly, but that's not. Uh, I think it's easier to have a variety which has an own character and a fruit. I go into another extreme, Sauvignon Blanc. You can make some fantastic fruit out of Sauvignon Blanc, and that's how the New Zealanders get famous with the Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, which is absolutely outstanding fruit. You pour it in the glass, and you don't even have to drink it. Everybody knows what's coming out of the bottle. It's so unique. That is
Right.
something which is also easier to sell and bingo, if somebody, a region finds its signature grape or flavor, that helps much more than that standard Coca-Cola type of thing, as I mentioned before.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So I've heard you say something about to the effect of, if you start with the wrong way to do it is to start with a vineyard and try to add ecology in it. The right way to do it is to start with ecology and then build the vineyard into that. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, that's uh, usually our viticulture is an absolute ecology catastrophe. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just a monoculture, and everything is killed by chemicals, which could be uh, present as beneficial or not. I mean, I think grass can be very beneficial for the soil structure, for the and people went into extreme after the Second World War when the chemicals were everywhere. Everything had to be clean, and the vineyard had to be spotlet clean, which is, for my eyes, a catastrophe. And
Yeah.
then they try to make it ecology, or bring back the ecology with putting in some grass as a monoculture, of course, as well. And at the end, you have to work with nature. That is the easiest. And just let the local plant society grow, as simple as that. So you can manage your cover crop quite easily. If you want to have your grapes grow more, you cut back the cover crop. Uh, if you want to, if you have a lot of water and your grapes grow too quick, you let grow the grass. It's like uh, the knob to regulate how your grapes should grow, faster, bigger, or slower, and also manage the quality. And then, of course, uh, the wine. Good God invented the wine to climb up to on a tree. So what it first does, it grows like mad to get up there. It doesn't make
Right.
fruit. And once it's up there and the shoots are hanging down, the growth hormones are always on the highest point. And the highest point would be the flower before the cane is bending down. So the flower gets everything. So everything goes into the grapes at the end. Because first the plant has to look for itself to get up into the sunlight, and second, the plant has to distribute the genetic, the seeds. So that's how it is designed. And what do we do? Uh, the opposite. We let it go straight up, and then we have to cut the hormones to make them make fruit, which is
Right.
totally weird. I mean, you just do everything wrong and try to cure it. If you have a high hanging system like it is in nature, you get a much better quality, and it's easier to grow. You don't have to bend down in my age. It's quite important not to have the cane down at 60 centimeters. And in some regions, it is law to have in Bordeaux not higher than 60 centimeter your fruiting cane. How damn stupid! Then you have the
That
fruit
is,
into the grass. Then you have to eliminate the grass. You just constantly
yeah.
creating problems which you have to solve. And finally, you need such a lot of pesticide that after 100 years, the grapes don't grow anymore. So you have to
I
find a new region. That's what they're doing now. They're ripping out uh, thousands of hectares of grapes in Bordeaux because it doesn't work anymore. Well,
well,
stupid, but that's how it
well,
is.
they're also. I'm going to come back to that trellising because I saw that and yeah, everything you just said is the. I'm trying to do that with actual trees as the trellis instead of just a post and wire. But what you just said about Bordeaux, there's a couple things I didn't realize it was regulated. The height of the cordon, that is incredibly.
Well,
Oh
everything
man,
is
that is
regulated. The amount of
that's
plants you have to have per hectare, the height of the
right.
canopy, everything is,
Wow.
well,
Yeah, that seems like a system that needs to change. I, but ripping out the vines, you bring up an interesting thing. I mean, part of that is because we just have a bunch of wine that nobody cares about, too, right? Like people aren't buying that wine anymore. How do you interpret some of the lack of interest in wine these days?
well, let's face it. Yeah, you have to uh, get the consumer interested for it. Now the young consumer is drinking Red Bull. It's a wee bit far away from wine. You can make some wine which is similar to Red Bull.
Uh huh.
Flappy sweet and muscat flavor, you name it, to get the consumer uh, on track. And then
Yeah.
sooner or later, consumer realizes that that sweet stuff is not uh, the ultimate thing, and changing slowly into the, yeah, I say Riesling, a nice acidity, a nice fruit, not too much alcohol, but a easy drinking wine, which is you can drink for hours. And
Yeah.
the old wine drinker is into the heavy duty stuff, like call it again Bordeaux style, high tannin,
Uh-huh.
high alcohol, the heavy duty thing. But the youngsters don't start with the heavy duty thing. Uh, go back to the Frenchmen smoking. They all end up with a Marlboro without filter. But that's what kills them at the end. But that's another story. Uh, the older you get, the more you like it. Let's say concentrated. But for a
Yeah.
young wine drinker, never ever. I mean, a young wine drinker glass of Bordeaux doesn't scares them off. They think,
Right.
"Wah." So you have to open the market for or get the market for the youngsters. Uh, Also, the rosé type. Old wine drinker is not into rosé, but the youngsters are. So I mean, you have to play the game. Let's put it that way. But if you
Yeah.
regulate everything, it has to be uh, back again that standard Coca-Cola. Red wine has to be either Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, or Merlot. I don't think you catch youngsters. Pinot Noir, stinky socks. I don't know if it's an old wine drinker which is used to it. He likes it again, but youngsters get them some street rosé, and so they get. You don't scare them away. As simple as that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Do you think? I mean, you know, given what you've said about the need to, really every generation, it sounds like, adapt the varieties that we're working with, because it is an ongoing process, as the world is just a flow of change and we have to keep up with it.
That's what it
Would
is.
you
Yes.
do you think that we should sort of retire some of or all of these big varieties that people are very familiar with now and sort of phase them out? I mean, is that the way that we, really? I mean, what's your vision kind of
No, 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 no.
for?
Don't, uh, something better is the enemy of the good. As simple as that. So just get better. If you stay
Yeah.
with the Chardonnay, you don't get better.
Yeah.
And it's just the evolution is cut off, and let the chance to find something better also to the winemaker and to the consumer. 100 years ago, there were 300 different varieties grown in Switzerland, and every region had its special whatsoever. I also have to say, at the time, uh, there wasn't in the cellar that sophisticated winemaking, stainless steel filters, you name it. Uh,
Right.
Usually, the wine which kept the best was the one which was so sour not even a bacterium went into it.
Right.
So
Right.
the acidity, the pH was more or less making the wine stable. And then people drank it with, they diluted it with water. Otherwise, it was too sour. And
Yeah.
the modern winemaking uh, gives you the chance of even work with wine which has a residual sugar, which doesn't have a too low pH at the end, which is easier to drink because Elbling in Germany 150 years ago, I mean, it needs a certain heroism to drink that stuff. you,
Yeah.
you you can use it in your kitchen to deacidify your sink or whatever, but that stuff was pH 2.8, hard to drink. And today you can make wine much more pleasant to drink, and it should be. Oh, that's why it was such a big story after the Second World War. That wine drinking was getting more and more fashion, and that's due to the winemaking, and also make the wine the consumer liked it,
Uh-huh.
which to a certain extent, I mean, again, there's some very sweet wine on the market, but uh, to uh, get the youngsters into it. But if you just narrow it down to those five main varieties, it gets boring, and these varieties are not the ones which, as I said, are the for the normal beginner the thing to start with.
Right. So as you look at wine, I mean, from your perspective, what guides your goals and decisions about producing wine?
Well, I mean, I, as a wine producer, uh, look for something which is easy to handle, which doesn't need to be sprayed or too much sprayed, let's put it that way. Sometimes
Yeah.
it helps to avoid that the fungi gets resistant to the resistance by easy, for example, baking powder uh, to make some sort of a reset if the fungi starts to evolve to make uh, to a new genetic to adapt to the resistant genetic. And if you just cut it back mid-season to zero, uh, that helps awful lot for not getting resistant fungus, resistant to the resistance. I mean,
So
so
you're talking about maybe like once or twice a season, it's a good idea to spray to help keep the
yes,
resistance from
e-
developing.
exactly. We've seen. Well, it depends how much fungi pressure do you have. For example, if you need 1 million spores to get one which is catching the new genetic, the resistance to the resistance. The question is, how long does it take to get 1 million spores in your vineyard? In south of France, it takes 100 years. In my vineyard, 3 months.
Right.
It's slightly
Gotcha.
exaggerated, but
Right,
just to
right.
say that if you have a lot of disease pressure and a lot of fungus, it's much quicker the next generation of fungus, which is um, the potential of having a resistant fungi. So if
Got
you
it. Yeah.
break that cycle, the fungi starts to evolve, and then you put it back to zero. It has to start again. And sometimes it doesn't need much, as I said, for oidium, baking powder, or sulfur. Sulfur is not terrible. I mean, a volcano spits out sulfur by the tons, and
Right.
sulfur is a very important micro element. Some crops need 30 kilos of sulfur per hectare, like wheat and barley.
Wow.
So it's nothing tragic actually. Call it a fertilizer. If you go into
Right.
copper, that's going to be a bit difficult. That's a heavy metal, which is mm, shouldn't spray it too often. And uh, so, if you have a very dense vineyard with a lot of plants, uh, a monoculture, of course, the fungi has easy life. But if you have a cover crop, let's say, if you have a lot of different plants and a few grapes in it as well, it's much more difficult for the fungi to evolve. So it should be a mixture, as I said, that ecological vineyard. Uh, you take ecology, a correct ecology, flowers, butterflies, and everything, and then you plant the grapes into an existing ecology to find out what works best and how does it work together. Uh, Introducing ecology in an existing vineyard is a bit difficult, but I mean you don't have to plant into a field uh, uh, with grass and herbs and whatever. You can all put it first. You put the vines, just plant them normally, and then you introduce the local plant society, and it grows up together. And in the first year, you have to favor the grape. Yeah, you have to favor the grapes in the first year, and then you can let go the cover crop and the total ecology. And at the end, how to see that the vineyard is very ecological. It's very simple. If you have the apex predator, which would be a snake or the, the animal which eats all the animals before. So
Right.
the last one in the food chain. In this case, all the rest must be here. Otherwise, the last one
Right.
wouldn't be there. So it doesn't even need much supervising and giving points for whatever. Just see what the birds and butterflies and, for example, the manatees insect, which is quite a vicious type of insect, which eats nearly all the other insects, but it wouldn't be there if there wouldn't be all the other insects around. So if you have the manatees in your vineyard, it looks like you're very good in ecology. So uh, at the end, that's also the interesting thing of the whole story. If you produce wine in a nature reserve, uh, I rather like the crickets singing than the tractor roaring. I hate tractors. I like
Yeah.
crickets. So sitting in my vineyard and have all that, not only the smell of the flowers, but also uh, the singing of the insects and the birds and everything. Well, that's the ultimate thing in life. I mean, that's and then you drink a glass of wine together with your birds and all sorts. That is, I call it lifestyle. And the vineyard,
Yeah.
coming back to Chardonnay, where you have to spray, even in Spain, some 25 times against the oidium. Uh, the damn thing smells of sulfur. It's no fun. Uh, I
Yeah.
don't see the point.
Yeah.
Well,
Agreed. So let's. I want. If you could you describe your trellising, like the specifics of your trellising? Because what I saw online was it looks like you have two vines growing up together, pretty high. And if you can talk about how high that is, and then sort of um, sloping down from that high point, what you were talking about for to create that hormonal messaging. Uh,
yeah. Well,
can you describe your trellising?
first of all, trying to make it not too expensive. When I was
Right.
in New Zealand 40 years ago, the trellis system, rigid smart, and tons of wires. Uh,
Yes.
how damn stupid. When I saw this, I thought, we have to find a better way. Now, it's very simple. A post uh, holds the wire. So you have to have posts and one wire. But that's about all. And then, of course, a post can hold a wine, or even two, on the left side and on the right side. So you have
Right.
every 2 meter 50, you have a post. Every 5 meter, a big one, and every 2 meter 50, a small one. And that is enough to keep your main wire, the only wire which holds the vine. And then you prune it. You can make spur prunes or cordon royal, like the normal pruning, and just leave it. It starts to grow, it hangs down, it makes fruit, and it even stops growing because if the shoot is hanging down, it doesn't grow more than 1 meter 50. Bingo, end of the story. And it's you have the most sunlight in the leaves that way because every leaf can look for its own space.
Well, that's it for now. If you are not a paid subscriber, if you'd like to become a paid subscriber to get full access to this and all the content at Beyond Organic Wine, you can easily do that at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. Thank you so much. And here's a little music from Colden Pro. A big thanks to him for this.